This, ladies and gentlemen, is no ordinary Tuesday. No, this is a day carved into the very blueprint of Formula One drama, a day when teammates became adversaries, when silence gave way to sparks, and when a single moment at the Canadian Grand Prix told us everything we needed to know about the state of McLaren's house. For June 24 has brought with it not only a collision of carbon fiber, but a collision of trust, strategy, and ego. This is the story of Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and the unraveling pressure cooker inside McLaren. It was bound to happen. Like a slow-motion storm creeping over the circuit, the tension had been building. From the first free practice to qualifying, from post-race briefings to quiet glances in the paddock, the writing had been there for all who cared to read it. These two young lions, Norris and Piastri, were headed for a crash. Not just metaphorically, literally. And in the closing stages of the Canadian Grand Prix, it happened. The clash, subtle yet seismic, unfolded with the cruel precision that only Formula One can offer. Norris, chasing a podium, with Piastri in close quarters, failed to yield. Or perhaps believed he didn't need to. The two touched. Not a monstrous crash, not a spectacular shunt, but enough to alter race outcomes, team morale, and quite possibly the direction of McLaren's 2025 campaign. And in that moment, everything changed. Ted Kravitz, the ever-watchful eye in the Sky Sports pit lane, saw it not just as a racing incident but as a watershed. A breach of code between teammates. A crack in the armor of harmony that McLaren had worked so desperately to preserve. And if Kravitz was fired up on air, it was because he understood the stakes. He'd already been at the center of another tense moment earlier in the weekend. An icy exchange with Max Verstappen that showed even the most composed competitors were walking a tightrope in Montreal. But with McLaren, the dynamic was different. It wasn't about championships or dominance. It was about order. And that order had just been broken. Kravitz didn't mince words. He pointed squarely at Lando Norris, the golden boy turned aggressor. The driver many once considered future world champion material, now in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. The British talent, hailed for his charisma and sharp racing instincts, now found himself under scrutiny not for what he did to his rivals, but for what he did to his teammate. Oscar Piastri, the calm Australian, the methodical thinker behind the wheel, had every reason to feel aggrieved. He had driven smartly, kept pace, and played the team game, until the team game turned into a gladiator match. He didn't retaliate on the radio. He didn't lash out. But the silence, that was its own form of fury. Inside the McLaren garage, tension could be cut with a torque wrench. Andrea Stella, the team principal caught in the middle of two rising stars, wore the look of a man who had seen this before. And perhaps, feared its consequences. Because in F1, collisions don't just happen on track. They happen in strategy meetings. In sponsorship negotiations. In next year's driver contracts. And the fallout is not measured in seconds lost, but in trust eroded. Kravitz knew that. He spoke to it with urgency. This wasn't about placing blame. It was about accountability. About recognizing the slippery slope that begins with one moment of selfishness and ends with a divided garage. McLaren had come too far to allow history to repeat itself. They had clawed their way back into contention over the past seasons, building a car that could challenge the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari, reigniting hope in fans who had watched the team flounder through years of underperformance. Now, all that progress was under threat, not because the car lacked pace, but because the drivers lacked unity. It is always a delicate balance, managing two alphas. We've seen it before, Senna and Prost, Hamilton and Rosberg, Vettel and Webber. The ingredients are always the same: talent, ambition, pride. And the outcome? That depends on leadership, on whether the team chooses a side, or draws a line. Andrea Stella now stands at a crossroads. Does he clamp down on Norris, risking alienation of their most high-profile talent? Or does he try to keep both drivers happy, knowing full well that appeasement often breeds further chaos? One can't help but recall the early days of Lando's career, when he was seen as the underdog. The smile, the memes, the good-natured ribbing of older drivers. But Lando has changed. He is no longer the upstart. He is expected to lead, to deliver, and to win. And with that expectation comes pressure, a pressure that sometimes leads to miscalculations. And what of Piastri? Quiet, composed, clinical. He doesn't light up the press conferences, but he lights up the track. He has earned his seat, earned his respect, and now, he has earned the right to be treated as an equal. Not as a number two. Their battle, though physical for mere seconds, is now emotional and psychological. Because once teammates touch, something intangible is lost. The innocence of partnership, the assumption of protection, the shield of shared purpose. It was only a matter of time. That's what people said all weekend. Like a Greek tragedy unfolding with perfect inevitability, the Norris-Piastri collision became a symbol, not just of racing aggression, but of team dynamics unraveling at speed. Stella's post-race face said it all. The disappointment, the frustration, the quiet calculation of what must come next. Kravitz, for his part, served as the sport's conscience that evening. Not angry, just disappointed, because he's seen too many bright teams implode from within. And he knows McLaren's resurgence is not guaranteed. It is fragile, delicate. One more incident like this, and the progress could disintegrate into finger-pointing and politics. And what about the fans? The orange-clad faithful who have stood by through thick and thin. They deserve better. They deserve a team united in purpose. They deserve drivers who remember that while ambition fuels greatness, ego often burns it down. June 24th will be remembered not for who won the Canadian Grand Prix, but for who lost something more valuable. Trust, unity, composure. Lando Norris must now ask himself a hard question: what kind of leader does he want to be? One who dominates at any cost, or one who builds something lasting? Oscar Piastri must ask a different question: how long can patience last in a sport that rewards ruthlessness? And Andrea Stella must make a choice: reinforce order, or let the gladiators battle freely and risk collapse. Formula One is not just a sport. It is a drama written in tire smoke and radio waves. And this latest chapter, written in the final laps of Montreal, is one that may echo through the rest of the season. The story is not over. It has just begun. And what comes next may well define the legacy of both Norris and Piastri, not as drivers but as teammates. As rivals. As men.